If I told you that since the very first day you were born, you were tricked into believing that someone was watching you around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year long. Imagine if I told you that since the very first day, the books you enjoy, the TV you watch, and the people you trust the most, even your own parents, are covering up for a big lie in order to control you and many others like you. You would certainly call me a conspiracy theorist, and you would be right. But wait a second. Then you would also have to call most of the people in this room conspiracy theorists as well. For most of us, we had our first experience as conspiracy theorists when we started to question the official account of one of the biggest conspiracies ever known to mankind. Santa Claus. To those of you to whom this story applies, try to remember. You were 6 years old, maybe 7. Who was ridiculous back then? The ones who denied the existence of Santa? Or the ones who still believed that one single individual could visit every house on the planet in a single night? In Western culture, ceasing to believe in Santa is one of the first indicators that a child has reached the age of rational thinking. To doubt what people tell you, even those you trust, even those in a position of authority, like your parents, is the very marker of critical thinking. So why is it that now the ones who challenge the official truth are the unreasonable ones? Why is it that now the ones who believe at face value what they are being told are the rational ones? If you doubt, then you're labeled a conspiracy theorist. And you must either be cured as if you have a mental disease, or you must be excluded because you're too dangerous. Most of the time, both. Last week, an amazing singer appeared on the show The Voice in France. She chose the song Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen, and she sang it so perfectly well that within a couple of seconds, all the 4 members of the jury just pressed the red button to turn their seats around and gaze upon the face of such an angelic voice. And she does really look like an angel. She's very young. She's 22 years old. French media praised her beauty and talent. Many agreed that she had to be the winner of this year's competition. Until the next day. One of her old tweets was exhumed from the graveyard of Twitter. It referred to the terrorist attacks that took place in France, in the south of France, in 2016. And she wrote, quote, "I find it weird that terrorists always leave their ID cards behind them for the police to find." End quote. The French media was outraged. This is not acceptable. She's not an angel. She's a conspiracy theorist. She should be excluded from the show now. Well, she wasn't excluded because she quit. She apologized for her tweet and quit for good. Now, in her case, apologizing was probably the best option. My own experience with being labeled a conspiracy theorist is a little different. First of all, as you may have noticed, I'm unfortunately not 22 years old anymore. But fortunately, I've been able to live all those additional years without ever having my own Twitter account. I'm a political scientist. I study military coups. I focus on constitutions, those constitutions that entrench the power of the military for good. So I tried to look for words that would capture this power that remains even when officially a civilian government has taken back over after a coup. And I thought the words deep state were pretty good. It was not one of my brightest moves. Because actually the words deep states are associated with conspiracy theories. Why? Well, maybe because it reminds us of one of the most famous conspiracy theories ever, a conspiracy theory that turned out to be true, the Watergate. As you may know, the main informant was nicknamed Deep Throat. Now, those two words together have since had quite a successful career over the internet. But it was also used to name the main character in the series X-Files. The plot was simple. It's about aliens. The American government has found out that there are aliens on Earth, and he's trying to cover it up. So that's why when I say deep and state, or deep politics, or deep government, it may bring back scary images of aliens and David Duchovny as well. So you look all worried now, so I'm wondering if I haven't ruined your belief in Santa. Okay. There's a day I'll always remember. I was invited to speak at a conference in a very fancy room, just like this one or this one. High ceiling, marble statue, and wooden floor. I was sitting next to an academic, a renowned senior academic whom I dearly admired. He had earlier praised my work and even published it. But for some reason, on that day, as I was speaking, he interrupted me and said, "Is the CIA involved as well?" Well, I bet it is, because the CIA is always responsible for everything that goes wrong in the world, isn't it, Miss Meriot? Now the room immediately went quiet. In German, we call that a Totschlag argument, a killer argument, because it just killed the discussion. It's not about what I'm saying, it's about me as a person. It's about denying me the right to be here in this room, excluding me from the community of scientists. It's very brutal, symbolic violence. Now, what he didn't like was the idea that sometimes deep structures actually matter more than the visible workings of the daily government. In fact, in the social sciences, structuralists are usually mistaken for conspiracy theorists because they reason on the principle that structural reasons explain why things unfold the way they do. The opposite view is the cock-up theory, whereby everything is random and happens by accident. The result is chaos. Well, first of all, let me tell you something. It's very, very difficult to organize a military coup by accident. And second, it's not because there is chaos that there was not a lengthy process of planning involved. Just think of the typical family reunion. Weeks and weeks of planning, and then chaos. So let's get back to my original metaphor. You might object, well, Santa, this is not a real conspiracy because it's harmless. A real conspiracy has an unlawful means and unlawful ends as well. Well, that's right. The Santa Claus example does not fit. Actually, it's what we call a quasi-conspiracy, which is something quite different. It's when people cooperate without even noticing it, just because their interests coincide. It's like an invisible hand. No planning involved. Let me give you an example. There is currently this worldwide unplanned conspiracy that tends to spread the idea that menstrual blood is in fact blue. Less trivially, the mechanism of quasi-conspiracies has enabled governments, with the help of businesses, scientists, and intellectuals, to advance throughout history the dominance of one specific gender, one specific race, without those involved knowing what they were being a part of. Now, in politics, people conspire all the time, and they very much know why. Just think of the Roman Empire and the assassination of Julius Caesar by his closest aides. You would call that a Machiavellian tactics, and that would be anachronistic, but that's okay. Machiavelli laid the foundations for the way we think about politics today. His book was published in the 16th century, and he mentions the word conspire 20 times out of 40 pages. He basically told us that the art of politics is the art of conspiracy and counter-conspiracy. Now, there is something he forgot to mention, is that the art of politics is also the art of inventing false conspiracies in order to justify an illegal or immoral action. This is the only way you can legitimize a military coup or a war of aggression. The founding father of the technique of the coup, Napoleon, did just that. He pretexted there was a conspiracy that was about to overthrow the government, and that's how he seized power, and he was able to rule for 15 years in France and much of Europe. A century later, Adolf Hitler, made an extended power grab after blaming the fire at the parliament on the communists as part of a communist conspiracy. And closer to us, think about the war in Iraq and how the Bush administration lied at the UN about the existence of weapons of mass destruction and the threat it posed to international peace. Not to mention the fact that still today many people believe that Saddam Hussein was somehow involved in the 9/11 and that this is the justification for the war. Now, the French philosopher Michel Foucault said there are 3 ways to control speech. First, you repress it. Second, you label its advocates as irrational, crazy people, untrustworthy. Third, you label the content as unscientific. Today, do we label the governments who engage in conspiracies as conspiracy theorists? No, we do not. Because this label's special function is to attach a stigma to a specific discourse, the popular discourse, not the official discourse. Today, conspiracy theories are unscientific and conspiracy theorists are irrational. So will tomorrow conspiracy theories be criminalized? Who controls speech controls truth. So if we're serious about freedom of expression, If we cherish the plurality of truth, we should resist as much as we can the creation of a ministry of truth. We are here because we're Generation Y, or the millennial generation. So we were born in the late 1980s. But there's something sure. We don't want to live in 1984. Thank you very much.